All right, welcome to the RCT Show. This is episode 3. Here to talk everything about KU sports, which right now it's March, which means really KU basketball. We can get to football once basketball is over, which hopefully won't be for a while yet. Tonight we've got again Fetch and also Mikeville or Mike. I'll let you decide how you want to be referred to on the show here, but we've got 3 people here tonight to talk about uh, senior night for Kansas, and then the upcoming Big 12 tournament, which starts tomorrow, or I guess it'll be today by the time anyone is watching or listening to this. But before we get into the tournament, just to kind of touch on senior night a little bit. Um, there was, I think, a pretty impactful moment after the game when Jamari Traylor gave his speech. We've seen a lot of senior night speeches over the years, and um, here in for the most part, they're kind of cookie cutter, which is understandable because you're asking a college kid to get up and talk in front of thousands of people. But every now and then you do get a really memorable one. I think we probably had 2 on Saturday between Perry Ellis, who's usually so stoic and reserved, actually showing good sense of humor about the all the Perry Ellis's old jokes floating around out there, and then kind of a complete 180 with Jamari Traylor, really talking about how special his time at Kansas has been. So it's kind of gotten me to thinking. We've heard a lot of recruits over the years. I know, Traylor said it this week, obviously, and then I know Andrew Wiggins and Ben McLemore have both talked about a big part of the reason they came to Kansas being the sense of family and closeness that they got from the team and just from the university overall. And I'm sure part of that just comes with the territory of being on a college basketball team and going through the rigors of the season with that group of guys. But it seems to be especially especially strong at Kansas. So, uh, in Mike, we can go to you first on this. Do you feel like um, that's just something that comes with the territory of being on a team at that level, or do you think that Bill Self has managed to cultivate an environment where that feeling of family is stronger and not just an analogy, but they actually do feel like a family?
Well, I don't think that we're allowed to use the term family. I mean, having our in-state rivals taking that over, is that their thing? I'm just kidding. Um, I mean, Jamari Taylor's speech was one of the more emotional senior days that I've seen in a long time. And I think a lot of that had to do with his upbringing and, where he was from and some of the things that he had gone through, especially during high school. Uh, I don't know that Kansas is any more of a family than any place else is, but I think Jamari and Bill Self certainly have a very special relationship, and I think that played the biggest part in that.
Right. Fetch, do you feel like it's been any more powerful of a recruiting tool for Bill Self at Kansas than elsewhere, or is that just something we're more aware of because it's the team that we follow?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not in the locker room, obviously. Who knows? But it's kind of funny that you asked this because I don't know if you guys know what time hop is, but it's like this thing where it like every day it shows you what you tweeted or Facebooked or whatever on this day, however many years ago. And my one from whatever year we were recruiting Wiggins, I retweeted some guy apparently on this date of that year. Um, I retweeted one of the old ESPN recruiting guys who tweeted something of he heard from Wiggins's family or people or whoever that he was most comfortable on his trip to Kansas because of Bill Self and the guys in the locker room. So obviously, I mean, there's something to it with some guys. And this isn't Wiggins saying it after the fact. This is him saying it before he decided, because obviously everyone when they leave school is going to say, oh yeah, it was special in the family and stuff like that. But I think it holds a little bit more weight saying that before you pick a place. So, I mean, maybe there is something to it. I mean, like Mike said, obviously, Bill Self has pretty strong feelings towards Jamari Traylor, and he probably should. I mean, I don't think anyone, even his biggest fans, would argue that he's the most skilled player on the team, but he certainly tries as hard or harder than anyone, and Bill Self loves that. So, it's probably some of the, like, we want it to be there because we're Kansas fans, and there's probably some of it that's grounded in reality.
Yeah, and I think that's probably where the truth is, somewhere in between the two. It does seem like a lot of players use that word family when it comes to Kansas. I mean, I don't know the origins of the FOE, family over everything quote, but I mean, how many players from that Morris twins and Thomas Robinson era ended up with that tattooed on themselves somewhere? I mean, it seems to be something that comes up a lot with KU players. So, I think probably just about every player feels like some sort of sense of kinship with his teammates, especially on that when you're playing at that level and going through what they have to go through to play. But I do think it seems to have been a little stronger at Kansas over the years, and probably has helped Bill Self land a few recruits. Moving forward to the actual game itself, it looked like things might be in a little doubt there. Iowa State was able to get the lead for a while there late in the second half, but it just seemed like the magic of senior night at Allen Fieldhouse just took over, and Kansas was able to come away with the win. With the way they've been playing lately, Fetch, we'll go to you first on this one. Did you ever feel like that was in doubt, or were you pretty comfortable that Kansas would still be able to come out on top even after Iowa State was able to take the lead?
I was only able to watch it off and on, to be honest with you, but I don't know. Iowa State, the way that their team is structured, they're just a tough matchup for Kansas just because of the way that Niang can get out there on the perimeter and force guys to go out and guard them, and they can really spread you out, and Kansas struggle defending one-on-one and stuff. So, I mean, I was a little worried because of that, but they're so bad defensively that I never really thought that we would lose to them because, I mean, Jamari Traylor, bringing it back to him, absolutely destroyed a couple of guys on drives and stuff. So, I don't know. I wasn't too worried that they would lose.
Yeah, I've been a little surprised by how they went through the coaching change and transitioned away from a coach who apparently really put no emphasis whatsoever on defense, and they've actually gotten worse this year. Part of that's probably been Jamil McKay, kind of. Maybe I don't know exactly where his head's been at, but obviously he was suspended for a while and then not starting for a while. But they really seem to have taken a step backward, and they weren't that good to begin with last year. But yeah, it was interesting to see Jamari Traylor really abuse guys taking them to the rim. It's not usually a part of his game that you get to see. And Mike, were you ever worried, or did you feel pretty confident that things would work out on senior night once again?
Yeah, I was never too terribly worried about that. The most we were ever down late in the game was 4. And I just, the thing about this group of Kansas guys, they just, and it's kind of unfortunate, I guess, but when they need to, they buckle down and they play defense. And I think they're one of the fewer teams in the country that can do that. I mean, Iowa State didn't score for 5 minutes at the end of the game from, 5:09 to 50 seconds left or something, and Kansas just ran away from them. And I kind of assumed that was happening, and I was ready for that to happen. Obviously, you want that to happen earlier, and you just kind of want to coast, and, you get Evan Manning a few more minutes or whatever at the end. But, it did eventually happen, and we got him, and like I said, I was just never too terribly worried about it.
Yeah, that's an important point, too, is that Iowa State is one of the most efficient offenses in the country. They can score from 2-point range and 3-point range very effectively. And yeah, to really lock them down the stretch was pretty impressive. Like, I do have to ask, what the hell is that picture behind you in the background?
You can't tell?
I mean, I can see what it is, but I still don't. I think my question still stands. What the hell is that?
That's the crew of the Starship Enterprise, David. Come on.
All right, is that's Captain Kirk, right?
That's right.
All right, yeah.
And Mr. Spock right there.
All right. Well,
Where's Darth?
Where's what?
Where's Darth Vader?
Darth Vader. That's what Dave's wondering, isn't it?
yeah, I don't see Darth Vader or Han Solo on there anywhere, so must be an incomplete portrait. Looking ahead, now Kansas has K-State to play. Again, I never know how to refer to these things. As of right now, it's tomorrow, but they'll be playing them at 1:30 on Thursday. You would think that they'll probably get by Kansas State. K-State looked. It's hard to tell exactly how they looked tonight because Oklahoma State looked really bad for the most part. But there's really no reason for that to be too competitive a game. So you would think that Kansas will be in the semifinals. I think we probably lucked out in playing the winner of Texas and Baylor and not having to risk Iowa State, who beat us once and really could have beaten us twice, or West Virginia, who was able to beat us once, or Oklahoma, who took us down to the wire in both games. So we're avoiding all three of those teams. So is there a preference in the semifinals as to who you'd like to see between Texas and Baylor? And then is there someone you absolutely don't want to see on the bottom of the bracket, or someone you think that we can handle better if we're able to make it past the semis into the finals? Mike, we can go to you first.
Don't care. As long as we win on Thursday, don't care. A loss on Thursday would be a bad loss and be a little bit embarrassing. I don't think it would affect our seeding at all. I think regardless of what happens, we're going to be the overall number one. But Texas, Baylor, 6-1, half dozen the other, man. And then, if we happen to win that, bring them on. You're in the championship game. You can play anybody. Anything could happen.
All right, Fetch, how about you? Anyone you want to see or want to avoid?
Well, I kind of echo the sentiments in terms of the semis. Baylor and Texas are kind of similar in terms of quality, not in terms of style, obviously, but in terms of quality, they're similar. I don't know. It might be nice to play Texas just to get another game against a team with a shot blocker and then a point guard who can kind of cause you some trouble defensively. But either one is fine. And then the title game, if we make it that far, I really want to play Iowa State. Just because, the two games we've had with Oklahoma have been just long, tense affairs, and who knows, you don't want, they're going to have 4 days off because they're going to play in Boise, and Boise is a Friday, Sunday site, so they'll get that extra day of rest. But you still don't really want to screw around with that at this time of the year. And then, West Virginia, this might just be because they hurt Perry Ellis's knee last year, but I don't really want a repeat of that. And, it might be nice to get some practice against the press, but it's kind of the same thing where I don't really want a big knockdown, drag-out affair. The Iowa State game would obviously be tense, but it's just much less of a physical battle and just more of like a basketball game, I guess, which is what I think I want. So that would kind of be my preferred path if possible.
Right. Yeah, and I agree with both of you in that. Yeah, I'll watch the Texas Baylor game tomorrow just because I think it should be an entertaining game, but I don't think you can see my cat in the background there. It should be an entertaining game in which team we get to face off against. Again, assuming we beat K-State. Kansas State, they're not a bad team. We should probably not just overlook them entirely. Yeah, my cat is really distracting me there on the couch in the background.
Go ahead, Kat.
But both of them are back there fighting. That's awesome. But yeah, as far as the other side of the bracket goes, Iowa State always just worries me, especially in the Big 12 tournament where they tend to get tons of fan support. Last year, I was there for that championship game between Kansas and Iowa State, and they had a few more fans in the Sprint Center than KU did, which is honestly kind of embarrassing. But I mean, they get a ton of people in Kansas City, and it's almost they almost create a home atmosphere. So just given the way they can score and given the way they can just heat up and put up a ton of points, I'd rather not see them if we do make it to the finals. But at the same time, I don't want to see Oklahoma much either. So there's not a great option. Maybe West Virginia, just like Fetch said, give you a little more experience against the press. There's a possibility you could see that in the tournament, but yeah, I don't think it much matters. And as Mike pointed out, I think we're the number. I think we could lose by 30 to Kansas State and still be the overall 1 seed in the tournament, just because of the strength of the resume at this point. So in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter.
I don't want to interrupt here. I just want to make a quick point on your Iowa State home ground thing. I think that would be a good thing to face. I mean, I guess I'm coming at it from the angle that I don't really care if we win the Big 12 tournament because we are going to be the number 1 overall seed, so it doesn't really matter.
Yep.
But if we're playing in the second round against Purdue or whomever, and we're behind by 5 with 5 minutes left, obviously every other fan base is going to be cheering for them, and same thing if we should, God forbid, run into trouble in the first round. And so, I mean, obviously, the team has played road games all year, but I think it would be nice just to get kind of a road game in a neutral environment just in case something like that happens. I mean, it didn't really work last year, but then again, we weren't healthy last year either. So, I just think that would be nice to have that extra little bit of experience in that environment.
Yeah, we weren't entirely healthy, and Cliff was out, but also the more I look at last year and just Kansas' profile last year, and this is kind of veering off topic, but I just feel like last season was just this strange aberration for Kansas basketball where they really, if it weren't for their strength of schedule, I think their offensive rankings by most metrics would have been a lot lower than it was. They shot really poorly from two-point range, which is completely out of character for Bill Self teams. They just seemed to go through long stretches of time where they just ran out of ideas offensively, and we saw it maybe for a little while in January this year, but it hasn't been a problem the whole year like it was last year. So I'm not really sure what to make of last year. The more I look at it. It's largely the same group of players, and I don't think they've all just taken huge strides forward. It almost just feels like last year was just kind of everything that could have gone wrong, kind of going wrong. Wayne Selden, I think, was shooting like 39% at the rim or something like that. It just was almost unsustainably bad, and yet they were still able to win the conference. But again, that kind of getting sidetracked.
Perry getting hurt really screws for the tournament too. I mean, once that happened, I think Mason was run down too. But once Perry, hurt his knee and wasn't 100%, that just kind of ended everything. I mean, they weren't gonna like make the Final Four because they were in Kentucky's bracket, but they could have, with a healthy Perry, I think they could have been the Elite Eight.
Yeah, it seemed like Perry was playing maybe 80%, if I had to guess, just based on the way he looked by the Wichita State game and in the Big 12 tournament. I think he sat out the first game and then just played limited minutes the rest of it. So he definitely wasn't himself. And the way last year's team operated, where it was kind of when things stalled out, it was just Frank Mason trying to create something out of nothing. Not having a healthy Perry Ellis to go to, I think probably really hindered them down the stretch. But hopefully like you said, we can make it through the Big 12 tournament healthy, and we won't have to deal with anything like that this year. Yeah, now, Fetch, you had mentioned possible matchups in the in the second, third rounds of the NCAA tournament, and again, assuming that we make it past the first weekend. And I know that you had mentioned something earlier today about looking through possible Sweet 16 matchups and just seeing how easy it would be for us to get a really tough matchup. I'm looking at Jerry Palm's predicted bracket right now, and the 4 and 5 seeds out there are just, maybe it speaks to the parity at the top this year that everyone's been talking about, or maybe they're just a bunch of strong teams that have just fallen that low. But looking at the 4 and 5 seeds, you've got teams like Maryland, Iowa State, Arizona. He's got who else? Purdue, Indiana, Kentucky. Those are all really tough teams to play in the Sweet 16, even as the overall 1 seed. Hopefully in a couple of those teams, especially in whoever ends up in our bracket. Right now, he's picking Kentucky to be the 5 seed against Purdue, the 4 seed in our bracket in the Midwest right now. And that Purdue, I'm not as quite as worried about, but I do not want to see Kentucky in the Sweet 16. But it really does look like it's going to be tough sledding for Kansas, no matter who really gets into their bracket. So it'll be important that they continue this run they've been on and keep playing good basketball. Not that really, I'm not a big believer in game-to-game momentum, but if they start to get tired or things just stop clicking for whatever reason, they could definitely run into a team good enough to take advantage of that pretty early, I think.
Yeah, the Palm bracket's actually like the one I didn't look at. The other thing I guess to remember is that with all the big conference tournaments kicking off now, I mean, teams are going to move within these lines. I mean, if Kentucky goes out and blasts everyone and wins the SEC tournament, they'll probably move up. If Maryland wins the Big Ten tournament, they'll probably move up. And then if some of these teams that are on the lower end of the 2 and 3 line lose, you can see them falling back down and kind of the 6 seeds moving up and stuff like that. So I mean, I think there's a pretty wide range of teams right now to look out for, and I think it's just going to come down to matchups. The only thing with this team is that I can't seem to really nail down like what teams would be a problem. I mean, teams with point guards that can get in the lane really well would probably be a problem. So, obviously you don't want to see Tyler Ulis. But the only other thing that really gives us problem is like a guy like George Niang. But I mean, there's only one George Niang really. No one else in the country can really do what he does. So I think it's just going to be kind of how KU is shooting on that day from deep and how many threes they want to take. And other than that, I don't really know that there's like a specific matchup to watch out for. I just don't want to see good teams.
Yeah. Do you feel like this year is any different from any other year in that regard, or is the whole parity at the top narrative a little overblown this year?
I think it's a little different looking at KU specifically. I mean, last year and even the year before, clearly we did not want to see a team with a bunch of big guys because Kansas would, do what they did against Stanford or do what they did against, I think it was Texas on the road a couple of years ago where, Texas was letting Kansas shoot all the threes they wanted and they weren't taking them. They were just plowing into the lane and, not getting foul calls and not scoring over these big guys. But now, I mean, you saw the last game against Texas, and I don't know if that would happen every time, but Kansas is getting open in rhythm threes, and they're, Bill Self saying, go ahead and take them. And part of that obviously is having guys who can shoot the ball really well. But I think the other thing that has helped is Perry Ellis isn't just a back to the basket guy anymore. He's a really good face up guy, and he can put the ball on the floor and he can shoot it. And, that draws these big guys out, and he can get by them and score 1-on-0. So I think that matchup problem isn't totally gone. I mean, I'd much rather see a team that was small, but if we do play a team like a Purdue or a Maryland that has a pretty good interior defense, I won't be as worried as I would be in the last couple of years.
Mike, how about you? Is there a certain profile, a team that you'd prefer to avoid in the tournament, or is it just bring on whoever and just keep playing the way they've been playing?
Well, I was just thinking while Fetch was talking there that, the parity, the whole parity question, I mean, it's everybody always says the NCAA tournament is matchup dependent, matchup specific. It depends on, who you get, how hot they are, whatever. So, every number 1 seed, every number 2 seed is going to meet up with a tough team in the Sweet 16. I mean, anybody could get Kentucky in the Sweet 16. Anybody could get Purdue. Anybody could get Maryland. It's just not Kansas that has to watch out for them. So, I mean, there's going to be upsets. You just hope that your team isn't going to do that. As for, style of play, I don't think I have anything to add to what Fetch said. I think, we know it gives Kansas problems. And I think Kentucky would be a nightmare Sweet 16 matchup. They just would be. They would have the extra, I probably shouldn't go there, but they would have the extra motivation of the loss at Allen Fieldhouse. I mean, it's just not somebody Kansas wants to see. But, Villanova doesn't want to see Kentucky. Virginia doesn't want to see Kentucky. Like, none of those teams want to see Kentucky. So, I mean, you can talk about them. You can talk about Jared Uthoff or, whoever, Chris Dunn, or, I mean, they're not going to be a 4 seed. But it's just.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Just
yeah.
depends on.
Oh, sorry, there was a little delay.
Go ahead.
I thought you were done. Sorry. I think, the other thing to remember, too, is, like, as much as we don't want to see some of these teams, I mean, teams are sitting there saying, I don't want to be in Kansas's bracket. There's more teams saying, hey, give us Villanova, or hey, give us North Carolina, or give us Oklahoma, or whoever, than there are saying, hey, give us Kansas. So, there's that. And then there's also, I really do think that if Kansas is playing their best basketball, they're going to win. Last year they needed, the other team to kind of suck in order to win. I think 2 years ago there was kind of that too, especially, I mean, once Embiid went down, there was, okay, the other team needs to not play well too. But this year, I think that Kansas can take a team's best shot, any team's best shot, and if they're playing well, they're going to win the game. I mean, you saw it against Oklahoma in both games. You saw it in the Kentucky game. You saw it in this Iowa State game. You saw it in the Baylor game. I mean, obviously, Iowa State and Baylor aren't quite as good as those other teams. But, I mean, even, you look at the first game we lost against Michigan State, like Kansas had that game won and then did some of the stuff we were talking about where they just ceased to run an offense. And obviously, Valentine had an insane game. But, Kansas played awful and still almost won the game. So if they would have played as well as they could, they probably win. So I think it's more about, is Kansas going to play well than any other kind of matchups?
Yeah, and I think ultimately it comes down to, Kansas, whoever they play, Kansas is going to be the better team. So it's just a matter of fending off any upset bids and playing up to their potential. It kind of reminded me of something I heard from a local radio show host down here who was talking the other day about how this Kansas team going into the postseason just feels very different from the Kansas teams of the last couple of years that we've seen going in that have both been bounced in the first weekend. And I agree, it does feel different. What this guy was saying was that they're just playing looser, they're shooting more threes, the offense is more open. And it looks like they're tightening down on defense in a way that maybe they hadn't in the last year or two. But then looking back at those 2 years specifically, the last 2 years, last year we had Perry Ellis hurt and Cliff Alexander out because of the eligibility issues. And then 2 years ago, we were playing without Joel Embiid, who was the 3rd overall draft pick that year, despite being hurt. Do you guys feel like there is a different feeling coming into the postseason this year, or is it just a matter of the team being on a hot streak and also happening to be healthy? Mike, I'll go to you first.
I mean, a lot of it has to do with the loss streak. We haven't lost since January. A lot of those games haven't been close. Like, Kansas is clearly playing a level above the rest of the teams in the Big 12. Now, it's not 100% true. You know, Oklahoma gave us everything for 2 games. Baylor played us well at Baylor. I mean, we just embarrassed Texas. That was hilarious in Austin. I mean, you could say it feels different just because they're playing so well right now, and it's just hard to see them not play well and lose a game right now.
All right. And Fetch, what about you? Do you think there's anything different or special about this team, or is it just the fact that they've been able to stay healthy?
Well, I think, one kind of cautionary tale is, I mean, the last couple of years, Bill Self seemed really tense during the NCAA tournament, like more so than usual. And I think that maybe kind of influences the players to play a little bit more tense. So hopefully that doesn't happen this year. I definitely think, obviously, health is a big thing. It's kind of funny because I poo-poo a lot of they're good in close games, so that means they have the, winning mentality. I mean, Maryland fans brought that out last year, and that hasn't really helped them too much this year. I mean, they're good, but then I watch this team play, and it's like maybe there is something to the fact that, I don't know what it is, but if Kansas is within plus or minus 5 points or so with, after the final TV timeout, I just think they're going to win the game. They have a good coach who draws up really good out-of-bounds plays, which you get a lot of those at the end of a game. They have a lot of veteran players who have been through a lot of big games. They have 2 point guards on the floor at all times. They have specialists like Brandon Green who can come in and just shoot a corner 3. They have 2 lottery picks sitting on the bench. So, I mean, I just, if we're 5 minutes left in the game and it's close, I just think Kansas is going to win. So, I mean, I think if you're going to get them, you got to get them early.
Yeah, I think even talent aside, I felt like for years that there's something in Bill Self's late game coaching that seems to give them a leg up on just about any opponent they face. I mean, you can go through, I think, just about any year they've had a fairly sizable deficit that they've either been able to erase or even overcome entirely in a game. And you go back to that, that famous last border war where Missouri was up by 19 in the second half. That overtime win over West Virginia at Allen Fieldhouse last year, where I think they were down by 16 or 17 to West Virginia.
Early.
Yeah. There was a Florida game the year that Wiggins was here, where we were just getting manhandled in the first half, and somehow ended up with a chance to make that close in the end. I don't know that we ever really threatened to win, but we brought it all the way back from really just looking like we didn't belong in the game to Wiggins kind of putting the team on his shoulders and making things close. I think I like the fact that Bill Self starts to foul early. He doesn't wait till there's only a minute and a half left and he's down 9 and then starts to foul. He's willing to start fouling, when the situation is right, when the right guy has the ball in his hands for the other team with 2 or 3 minutes to go, and turns it into that possession at a time style game where you can try and pick up points little by little throughout the last few minutes of the game. And really, I think it extends it as well as anybody. And that's not something maybe that always gets talked about with Bill Self, because a lot of the focus is on his ability as a defensive coach and as a recruiter. But I think he's about as good at the end of games, regardless of who he's got out there on the floor, as anybody. I think his strategy in the final minutes is as good as anyone I've seen.
Well, it was like I said, I'm pretty sure it was on Twitter, but whatever. In the Baylor game, it was a neck and neck thing. Baylor was probably outplaying us, and I just said, "Oh, something's gonna happen." I mean, whatever. Scott, I like Scott Drew, but obviously his late game strategy is his big Achilles heel. But I just said, something's gonna happen. Kansas is gonna win the game, and sure enough, Scott Drew uses all his timeouts for some weird reason. Baylor can't run an offense, can't get a shot. Meanwhile, Bill Self draws up the alley-oop play out of the timeout, which was a big momentum changer. He lit a fire under Wayne Selden's ass, who does, what he does when he's going well, and Kansas wins. And it was kind of like, oh yeah, of course they're gonna win. So you're right. I don't know. I think there just is something about, I don't know if you guys read that Sports Illustrated article today, but they went into detail about how Kansas's practices are so regimented, and they begin, and I think end too, but I know, begin the day with the same drills, and it's basically just to build the muscle memory so that, late in games when they have to close out on a shooter or have to do specific actions, they're not even really thinking about it. They can just go ahead and do it. And, I mean, maybe there's something to that helps them. I don't know.
Yeah, I think overall Bill Self's approach in just about any aspect of the game, whether that's in practices, on the court, off the court, X's and O's, I think he's just and I think his results back this up at this point. He's just one of the best in just about any area. And I'd say I'd be willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that structuring the practices in that way is probably beneficial. But his players certainly do seem to respond well at the end of games. We've just seen it time and time again over the course of time. And in the tournament, when so many games seem to be close and neck at the end because each team is fighting for a chance to keep their season going, I think that's especially important. And we saw it how many times in that 2012 run where they probably should have lost 3 times before they made it to the national championship game, but they just kept coming back. So yeah, I like having Bill Self even with the early tournament exits. I like having him in charge more than probably anyone. So we've covered the Big 12 tournament and the NCAA tournament. Obviously, we'll have another show once we know how the brackets are lining up after Selection Sunday. But we'll kind of end here by going through everyone. And do you have any picks for how the Big 12 tournament is going to play out? And do you care at all? And will you watch if KU were to get knocked out? And I'm sorry, I keep forgetting. We have 3 people here tonight, but Mike, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I don't. Like I said earlier, as long as we beat K-State tomorrow, I don't really care what happens after that. One, I don't want to lose to K-State, and even if it was Oklahoma State, those are bad enough teams that I don't want to lose to them anyway. But yeah, just get to the semifinals. If we lose to Texas or Baylor, and if we win, I mean, yeah, that's great. That's just icing on the cake, as it were. I mean, I think Bill Self and the guys they're here in Kansas City. They came to win the whole deal. I think they want to win. I mean, they're not here to go home tomorrow. So, I mean, you're here. You may as well play. You may as well play to win. But if we do get knocked out, yeah, I probably won't watch the title game. It's just the Big 12 tournament's not a big deal to me. Something about it. I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but for us, it doesn't matter. I mean, we're going to be the 1 seed. We're going to be the number 1 overall this year. Just get in, get everybody out healthy, and on to the big dance.
Right, and Fetch, same question to you. Do you see knowing Bill Self's record of saying that he might take it easy in the tournament and then usually not. Do you see them going all out and trying to win it, or do you think that guys might get some rest? And do you see Kansas being able to get through and win a Big 12 tournament championship for the first time in a few years?
I think one thing I want to see is Diallo and Bragg getting some playing time. I think it'd be nice just to give them each, 20 minutes a game for these 1, 2, 3 games, however many it is, and see how they respond and see if they're ready for spot duty in March. Both of them have their faults, but I think 10 good minutes or even 5 good minutes from both of them in a NCAA tournament game could go a long way to winning or losing a game when they're, maybe Perry Ellis is struggling or they're not getting any rim protection or what have you. So that's something I want to see. Other than that, I think West Virginia's style is probably going to lead to them doing pretty well. Teams aren't going to want to play them on the second day of a back-to-back or the third day of a back-to-back-to-back. Similarly, Iowa State has no depth, so you can't really like their chances, even though they seem to care about the Big 12 tournament more than anyone else. And Oklahoma kind of needs their mojo back a little bit. They've kind of struggled a little bit lately, so maybe they're going to buckle down and get the Big 12 tournament win. So, I don't know. I think one of those 3 teams is probably going to win. I never picked Kansas to win the Big 12 tournament, so who knows. But they are like 40% to win it at KenPom, which is a pretty big favorite in a Power 5 league. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't really care.
Yeah. I do see now that TCU was able to pull off the upset tonight and beat Texas Tech, so West Virginia is going to have a real easy game in the quarterfinals tomorrow. So
do you think that Tech doesn't make it to the big dance?
It just depends on how much the committee really looks at these conference tournaments. That's a bad loss because TCU is a really bad team. They lost 67-62, so it wasn't a blowout or anything. It makes them 19-12. They're still 9-9 in the Big 12. I think we've seen 1, if not 2, teams get in the last few years with 8-10 records in the Big 12. And with this being maybe their strongest year, it maybe knocks them down from an 8 or a 9 to maybe a 10 or 11, but I think it's still that they still get in.
Here's one for you. Pick one: Texas Tech or Wichita State.
You've got to bring Wichita State into this, don't you? For those of you out there who read the comments every day, that's been an issue of some debate over the last couple of days. This isn't going to be a popular answer, but I would go with Wichita State over Texas Tech, just because I think they're the better team. They obviously there's a huge difference in strength of schedule, but they do have a better record if you want to go off of wins and losses. I would slightly lean toward Wichita State in that situation.
Okay. Let's see here. Jerry Palm has Texas Tech as a 7. Lunardi does not have Texas Tech in. So
wow.
Kind of the opposite of the Wichita State thing, where I think Lunardi has Wichita State as a 7 and Palm doesn't have them in.
Right. Yeah, there seems to be a lot of disparity this year, and I don't know if that's a coincidence or if there's something about the way things shook out this season that's leading to that. But there seems to be a lot of disagreement amongst the bracketologists. I hate myself for saying that word, but yeah, usually there's some amount of consensus. Maybe two guys might be a line or 2 off in seeding, but there seems to be some wild variation going on this year. So it'll be interesting to see.
When in doubt, sorry, I'm on a huge delay here, so I don't mean to talk over you. When in doubt, I'm going to go with Palm, just because I was looking at Lenardi's bracket earlier, and he has Kansas playing Montana in the first round, which is wrong for two reasons. One, I would say you can't, but the committee makes it a point to say that they try not to schedule rematches in the first round. And two, his 16 seeds or his auto bids are all awarded to like the league champ or the highest seed remaining, and Montana did not win the Big Sky. So that is like doubly wrong. So I don't know. Lenardi has a lot of those little like mistakes if you look for him, whereas I think Jerry Palm has been one of the more accurate ones the last few years, as far as I know.
It shocks me that ESPN would put something up on their site that is not entirely factually accurate. That might just be telling people things they want to see just to get more clicks. But that's beside the point. Yeah, I would probably tend to lean toward Jerry Palm as well. Although Lunardi has not done poorly. I haven't looked at anything this year, but my recollection from looking at it in years past is that he is one of the better ones. But definitely something's got to break this year with the amount of disparity there is between some of their picks and some of their seeding. So it'll be interesting to see which way the committee goes, how much they're putting on resume versus maybe reputation and some other elements of performance this year.
I don't know if you guys ever looked at bracketmatrix.com, but they just aggregate like every bracketology. And I'm sure it hasn't been updated since the Tech game, but they track 92 brackets. And first of all, Kansas is the only team that everyone is given a 1 seed. Also, everyone has Texas Tech in the field right now. And 70 of the 92 have Wichita State in. And the seeds are all over the place. Like there's a lot of 7s, a lot of 10s, some 11s. So a 13, which I don't think they can get a 13.
Yeah, that's pretty low for an app bid or for an at-large bid.
You're going to give a team a 13 as an at-large, kick them out.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't mind seeing them in a play-in game, honestly, since there's some question about how many of those losses were just because they were without Van Vliet, and how much does their dominance matter, given the lower strength of the schedule they played. I wouldn't mind just seeing them thrown into a play-in game and telling them they basically have to earn their way into the field of 64.
Yeah, I think it'd be fun to watch them, Monmouth, Valpo, and one other good mid-major that didn't or doesn't win their league. Like if Stephen F. Austin, they're obviously probably a worse team than the rest of those teams, but if they don't win their conference tournament, put them in there, or put Princeton in there. Princeton is kind of Wichita State-like, where they have a lot of wins and some good wins and are pretty good, but don't have, probably have a debatable at-large profile.
I was thinking that the Ivy League had some sort of rule where they only put one team into the tournament, and it's only the regular season champion. Which I think is Yale. They will allow at-large. I was thinking they had some sort of weird rule where it's only the conference champ, and that's the only team that goes from the Ivy League. Yeah, I could easily be wrong.
I don't think they've had a second bid for forever, because there's obviously they don't ever have the situation where they have the regular season champ that blows through the league and then loses in the conference tournament.
Yeah.
So it's a lot tougher to get a second team that is good enough to make it to the tournament in a league where you regular season champ. So.
Or here's another mid-major you could throw in that group with Wichita State and Monmouth is George Washington. Jerry Palm has them in the first 4 out right now, so obviously they're right there on the bubble. If you wanted to see 4 mid-majors duke it out for a spot in the field of 64, then you could throw them in there. I don't know anything about them. I haven't followed them at all this season, but I see that they're right there on the bubble apparently. So
mean, I think that'd be more fun than watching like Cincinnati and Alabama and some of these teams that have had a lot of chances to rack up quality wins. Like like I was saying, Wichita State doesn't really have any wins, but I will say that they don't have the opportunity to. Whereas in Alabama has had, I mean, the SEC sucks, but you still get to play Kentucky, and there's always another team that's like good enough to where if you beat them, that's a good win. And so they've had their chances. I think you give the four best. I think it was Gary Parrish who floated this idea, but you take the four best mid-majors from like one bid leagues that didn't win their league tournament. So like obviously the Valley would be a one bid league if Wichita State would have won it. The West Coast Conference would have been a one bid league if St. Mary's would have won it probably. So like you take those four teams and you throw them in Dayton, and then say go nuts. I think that's probably the fairest way to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and I think that would probably attract some viewership too, even though they aren't big names. I think people like to watch the mid-major teams in tournament play just because of the potential for seeing kind of a nobody team making a big run. But we'll see how things end up shaking out. Like Mike referred to earlier, it's so much of it is just matchup dependent, and it can just depend on how your team is shooting in a given day. See KU's Elite Eight game against VCU. Sometimes things just happen when it's a single elimination tournament. So we'll look into that more once the field is announced and we know what KU's bracket looks like. I'm sure we'll all feel like they're in the group of death and that they got screwed over just because of the nature of fandom. But it'll be interesting to see how much weight the conference tournaments have on seeding. What Texas Tech losing to TCU tonight does to their chances or at least their seeding, and just how things shake out. But that's about all the time we have for tonight. So thanks again to Mike and Fetch for coming on late tonight and staying up and talking some college basketball. We'll be back again next week once the brackets have been announced, and we'll complain about KU's draw and talk about how they got the toughest one of anybody in the country. So. But thanks once again, and thank you to everyone at home who's watching or listening. Be sure to subscribe to the Rock Chalk Talk YouTube channel and hit like, and just make us look as good as possible so we can try and keep this going and deliver the best content possible. So thanks again, and everyone have a good night or a good day.